everyone, and welcome to the third and last session on the GIS workshop series. And very excited to talk about the story maps, even though I think everyone wants to have more detail on the process of creating GIS applications, some of the processes that Dr. Kirsty mentioned last time. But I think from the business perspective, there are many applications that GIS can be helpful, and then we can put the whole story behind the story map presentation. And the process of creating story maps is very intuitive, and I hope that everyone through the hands-on process and lab can really make that connection. So what I'm going to do, I actually wanted to talk about before I talk about the story maps, I want to talk about the year 2020 because everyone, I believe that it's kind of hating the year 2020. But from my perspective, as a GIS expert, as a GIS professional, I actually have seen a lot of applications of GIS in many aspects. We have seen the US Census surveys, we have seen the COVID dashboard, we have seen the food delivery. All of those, from my perspective, are applications of GIS. And of course, we can all together come up with a story that we can tell, and that could be our story map presentation for the GIS day. But what is a story map, and what is the best way to talk about story map, but to actually go over a story map presentation? I did create two versions of the story map presentation, one in PowerPoint, the boring PowerPoint, and then one in story map. And the funny story is that I made the story map presentation probably in 15 minutes, but the whole content behind it it has taken much more time. So let me share my screen and I'll talk about the story map presentation. And then please, if you have any question, let me know. I'll get back to your question at the end. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So narrative imagining, story is the fundamental instrument of thought, Mark Turner. And we tell ourselves stories in order to live, by Joan Didion. So everything that we have seen in the past about the GIS applications are just about data, about the visualizations. But if you wanted to convince someone to invest in your project, if you want to convince someone about the value of your GIS application, you can't just show them a map. You have to tell them how the map is actually produced, how the result can be interpreted, and what is the meaning of that map, how they can take advantage of the results. And that's what we do in the story maps. We are going to combine the stories with the maps. We are going to take the thought that we have and try to link that to the maps that we can get, and hopefully take the journey to somewhere that everyone is excited about. And hopefully you are all aware of the whole political scenario that is going to come up in several days, but everyone is aware of the value of the map for elections, not just in the US, in many parts of the world. But one way to explain how the electoral vote works is to go through the story map presentation instead of showing the maps or explaining about the Constitution or explaining about the way these processes work. And that's what I hope that everyone is thinking about when they are working on different business applications. So stories are memorable, compelling, and impactful. Stories put people in a receptive frame of mind. So when you are building a story, if you are telling a story, not just a story map, when you are telling a story, that could have an impact on people's lives. And that could also have impact on people's perception of that specific story. Stories are memorable, compelling, impactful. And the mindset of storytelling is going to be very important for many people. And that's, I let me scroll down. That's what I'm going to talk about in a second. Instead of talking about the very long history behind storytelling and the elements of storytelling, I'm going to just talk about some examples of story maps I made in the past. So you may think about how you can take your business application, how you can take your project result to a next level to probably show the result in a story map presentation. Story map is a product by Esri, is a web application that Esri has produced in the past, I believe, 7 years, and it runs on top of ArcGIS Online. Luckily, we already have started working with ArcGIS Online, so we don't need to really learn a new application. But story maps are very intuitive, so you don't need to learn about the coding process. You don't need to really learn about the process of creating web application. What you need to do is to have the mindset of how to tell the story by incorporating maps and data on the map. And why we need to use the story maps? Because people love story maps. I'm going to talk about why people love story maps, but also there is a very low barrier or entry for the story maps. No one needs a GIS background to start building story maps. What you need is a very compelling story and hopefully some maps that can support it. You put these together and then you can tell your story. So story map team by Esri talks about the clue structure that helps people to create very effective story maps. And they talk about the first element, which is connecting to audience. And we need to understand who is going to be the audience of a specific story map, because that is going to impact the content we are going to put into our story maps. Instead of putting too many technical stuff, we may want to generalize the content so people understand it much easier. And we have to lure people in. We have to excite people right at the beginning. If you go to different websites, the amount of time based on a survey, you may, on a new website, the amount of time you may actually spend is less than a minute. But the same survey found out that people spent more than 3 minutes on story maps. So there is more engagement, there is more time for people's interactivity with story maps. That's very important for many applications. The third element is user experience support the story. So if you know your audience, it's a very impactful process to include what they're thinking about, what experiences they may have. For example, if you wanted to present your result to a specific organization, you can talk about their maybe challenges, or you may want to talk about their success stories and incorporate those into a story map. Now they are more engaged even to your presentation. We want to make maps that are easy to read, or charts or graphics that are more that are easy to read or digest, because people without technical background may not have enough time or patience to sit down and do some research to understand what is the meaning of specific numbers on the story maps or on the maps or charts. So what we can do as the designer of the story map is to create a chart or map or graphic that is very easy to understand or very easy to read. And finally, we have to make our story maps very simple. We are going to make some stories that are more complicated or complex. That's still okay. But at the same time, if we are targeting specific type of audience without the background of GIS or the technical understanding of some of the information on the maps, we have to be able to edit this story in a way that is more digestible by those type of audience. So I have embedded some of the very interesting story maps that has been created by Esri, as well as some of the story maps that I have made myself. And I will share this link, the story map that I just made with you after the presentation, so you can have access to these links as well as the story map itself. But let me open up the introduction to story maps by Esri. And that's another very interesting thing about story maps, you can incorporate some of the interactive content within the story. So there's a connectivity that is going to happen. So they have built this story map to explain what is the story map. But what I really care about is that they have all these different sections of stories. You don't have to have these too many sections, of course, for the one story map that you have created for a specific application. But what we can do is that if there are different lessons, let's say as an educator, you want to create different lessons, that's where you can incorporate all those steps into different segments of the story map. Or as students, you want to have a presentation, different sections of your presentation could be incorporated into different segments. So they talk about what is the story map, what are the story maps, some examples of story maps, and they talk about different types of story maps. So you're gonna see a specific application today that we are going to create a story map based on an existing map. But the first time the story map has introduced to the market, it was the classical interface was way different. So right now it's even much more easier to create story maps. At the beginning, you had to select what was the actual type of the story map you want to create. For example, you can create cascade, so you can go navigate through the story map. You can create the map journal. So if you have different locations with the information and maps and images, you can use that. You can create a map series, very similar to map journal, but just navigation is different. And you can also have a short list with just lots of points on the map with images and some very brief description about those. And all those are different types of story maps you can create. But today we are going to create a story map from scratch without any coding in a matter of, I believe, several minutes. So that's very exciting about the advancement that has happened over the past 5 years over the story maps teams. But they also talk about why we need to tell stories. That that is going to be my next section of the story map. That let me go back and there are different steps for the storytelling that everyone can follow to create very successful story maps, but that's not going to be a cookie cutter for every type of story map. You can have your own style, of course. You may have even better style compared to many other people, but that's just a very standard way of creating successful story maps. So let me talk about these steps without really going through the whole presentation of story map. So you want to start your story map with a bank. So that bank could be a very impressive image, video, or a code, or something that is very impressive. You may have some hero in the presentation. For example, I wanted to talk about specific individuals, and that's going to take my audience to that journey with myself, and they are going to be more engaged with the story map. I should or may have some rhythm in my story map depending on the type of story map, which means there should be some logical consistency between different sections of the story map. You don't want to jump between different topics. Of course, there is a way you can do that, but you want to always think about the logical consistency of your content. It's very easy to add different images, videos, or text, but there should be some connectivity between all these elements. You definitely want to incorporate some maps into your story map, because story map without the map is incomplete. And we are going to talk about that today. And that's going to be very critical for many applications, because that's even more successful for many story map presentations. You may want to think about the way your story map is going to be viewed. Rita talked about the ArcGIS for the evacuation places in Orange County or Irvine. So that map was created in arcgis.com, ArcGIS Online, but that was visible on possibly every platform. No matter if you have a desktop or mobile phone or tablet, you could view that map. But if that map was produced for just desktop screen, that will be difficult for people who are not at home just using their mobile phone to view that map. So that's something you have to think about when you are presenting your story maps as well. You might want to think about the bigger maps that have more information in them, but they don't have that level of skill compared to smaller maps that are more descriptive, but they are used for just a description of a bigger scales, the description of bigger areas. And finally, you wanted to have call to action, which is going to be something we are going to add into our story map today as well. You don't want to leave people hanging, not knowing what to do or what is going to be the conclusion of the story map. You definitely want to conclude your story map with something very exciting as well as what you have started at the beginning. So there's another story map that I have embedded into my presentation. And this is, right now you see that this is just an image. So if a story map you want to embed in your story map, remember, there's different way you can connect. One is just create that link. One is to embed the story map. That could be displayed as an image, and then you can ask your audience to click on that because then they are going to be more engaged. So if I click on that story map, that's when the story map itself becomes activated. So this story map talks about different sections of the story map. Right yesterday, I believe the story map team has updated their story map. There are more updates coming up, but there is going to be always some functions that is new, but you want to be able to find those options based on the news that is posted by story map team. But the whole anatomy of the story map, luckily it has not been changed. Usually when it happens is at the end of the summer before, or maybe in the middle of the summer before the user conference. But you can have headers, some covers, images. You can have some links. You can, of course, customize the links, customize the color of the text, change the way the texts are going to be displayed as a header. So these are something people are aware of. But of course, you also wanted to have some maps here. So your map could be interactive, could be localized, could have some layers enabled. So you can, if you have, let's say, 10 layers, but you wanted to you wanted to just show one layer, you can make that list invisible. So instead of being able to see all of the different layers, only one layer becomes available for the viewer of your story map. Or of course, there's another way you can create another version of your map. And finally, at the end of your story map, you want to have some credits for people who are involved, yourself definitely, or the organization you work with. So that's going to be a story map that you can definitely put on your social media platform, your LinkedIn profile, or wherever you go as a project you have done. And that's something I believe was useful for many students. And another thing I wanted to talk about in the next probably section is my own story maps. So I made several story maps over the years, and I believe some of them are more descriptive, some of them are more technical, and the amount of time that I have spent on these story maps is similar, but the content I have put on these story maps is different. And that content, some of the maps, they have taken much more time to create because I have to do some data collection, data cleaning, processing of information, then do the analysis and get the results so I can use that result. Some of the maps already created, I just use them. And that's going to be something you can also think about. So the first story map I want to talk about is just a very descriptive story map about the GIS itself. And that could be something many educators could benefit from. They can, instead of creating PowerPoint slides, they can create story maps, and that's very interactive, and that helps to do some information right on the fly. I get information on the fly. So just made a story map, incorporated some content from Esri, added some videos, talked about the whole process of story map, incorporated some interactive maps, talk about the unemployment in the US, and this is clickable. So if I click on any of these points, it is going to show me the actual data behind it. And this is August data for Los Angeles County, and unemployment rate is 16.8%. So the data itself is being updated. Even though the story map has been made several months ago, the data is always going to be the most updated data. And that's something you can also think about, the way you can incorporate your story maps to be always the most updated, always have the most updated data. And I can go through different counties, of course, here and see the time series of those unemployment over the period of time here, which I believe is 14 months. Great. And then also I incorporated some of the other maps from the Business Analyst Online. And instead of incorporating the actual map, I have incorporated the screenshot of the map. So you don't have to always include the map. You can just take the actual image, because maybe that map takes much more space on your story map. You don't want to do that. You want to have just an image that always, a static image that always work. And that's something I did here. Just talk about the number of Facebook users. This is Cal Poly. Of course, we're going to have much more in terms of the social media users, but then you can also think about the Claremont and Zusa, all these different areas with different ranges of the Facebook users. And then also another application of GIS, which I have incorporated another map here, is about the unicast county by county grade for social distances, social distancing during the COVID period, which is still ongoing, and we can see which counties did better job or still doing a better job. So that's just one story map. I wanted to talk about a little more complicated story map I did, and that's about the location analytics of the Los Angeles traffic accident. And for that story map, which I did last year when we were actually on campus, I captured lots of data from the Los Angeles GeoHub, which is open data platform, and did the analysis for the traffic accidents inside another tool, ArcGIS Pro. And my question was to what are the areas that we see a significant change in terms of the amount of accidents. And that's very important for many applications. But how do we find those? We know the number of accidents in different areas, but how do we find the actual places that the accidents are significantly going up or they are significantly going down? And there is an actual GIS methodology behind it. We are going to implement the hotspot analysis to find the hotspot and cold spots. So what I did all these analyses to find the information I'm looking for. But before I just get to the result, I had to provide some background information about the traffic accidents, about the process I'm doing to get to my final interpretation. And that's going to be very helpful for many people who are going to read my story maps. Maybe they don't have that level of expertise, so they are able to understand what is happening here. So these are just the traffic collisions since 2010 in the whole area. This is also interactive. It's all connected to the LA GeoHub. So I can just open that link. It's going to take me to the LA GeoHub as well. And I can see the source data here. I did analysis of emerging pattern mining analytics on ArcGIS Pro to find these interesting points for myself. the hot spots and cold spots. So the hot spots are the places that are seeing a significant increase compared to the neighboring clusters, and the cold spots are opposite. They are seeing a significant decrease or significantly lower compared to their neighbor clusters. And that's very important because now we are able to see location analytics in different aspects. We are looking at the data over time, and now we are able to see which areas they are going to see more accidents. And we do have the data over time, so we can also slice it by the time, by the hour, see what time and where we are going to see the significant increase in terms of the accidents. And I did the whole demonstration on YouTube. I made a YouTube link and incorporated it into my story map, and find several hotspots here in the downtown LA and West Hollywood, Beverly Hills area. And these are the areas around 4 p.m. when the life was normal. We were, based on the data and the analysis of the data, we were seeing the significant increase in terms of the accidents. And that's something the city planners could think about how to use the information. So that's another story map. As you can see, the process of creating the story map itself is probably very simple, but the process of getting that graphic, it takes much more time. So depending on what you are looking for, you may invest more time on different platforms such as ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Online, or Operation Dashboard, and bring it into your story map itself. Another story map I want to talk about is let me talk about the emotional placement, place attachment mapping project I did, which probably some of you have remembered what Joseph was talking about last time about data collection and how we can incorporate those information into operations dashboard. What I did, I collected the survey responses over the place at my past institution and collected all those responses about the emotions of people about the places on campus, and wanted to find out what places are going to be more happy, or people feel more happy about those places, and on what locations people have different types of emotions. And I did a full story map on that application as well. Just want to talk about the process of data collection and getting the data here. I created a survey 123 to get these responses from the responder. They just provide their feedback about what they feel about that specific location. They even took a picture of that location, and everything when they submit is going to be uploaded on the ArcGIS Online that I have created. Everything will be just uploaded right away. And I collected all those data sets, find out, okay, these are the places that is going to be highly concentrated. It doesn't mean anything specific, just for my own understanding of where people actually posted most of the responses. But also I looked at the data itself. I sliced it based on the emotions and the size of the responses. So many people, of course, they felt more happy. So we see more of the yellow circles here, but there were some places with other types of emotions, the disgust emotion, the sad emotion, even some fear emotion. So I did a little bit more into that analysis to find out what was the reason for that. And this is all part of my story map, but there is another application again involved in the process. And I also created that operations dashboard. That's actually insights dashboard. That's also interactive to kind of show on the fly. You can embed your ArcGIS Online application into your story map. You can slice your data based on the gender. You can slice your data based on the actual pace. You can slice your data based on the emotions. And that's another thing you can think about. You can have that capability embedded into your story map, and that helps your audience to get more involved, more engaged with your story map. And there were some findings for that project, which I probably don't want to talk about, but basically the administration building, people felt more happy because it was well kept, but the other buildings were less happier. People felt less happy because it was not well kept compared to the administration building. So I don't know. That's something people have provided as part of their feedbacks, and that was not my understanding. That was what they have provided, and that could be another call to action, how people can improve the finding, or how people can incorporate the finding of the project for future applications. And that's another story map, which it required some actual data collection. And let me talk about maybe this story map, location analytics. So Dr. Kumar and I, we were talking about, as well as Dr. Reibel, we were talking about the process of maybe creating something for maybe a curriculum for the business GIS, and that's something we wanted to hopefully pursue in the future. But one way to talk about what is the value of GIS, what GIS can do or location analysis can do for the business application, is to create those interactive content as part of the story map. So when you are presenting that, is not just a static PowerPoint. People who are listening or looking at your presentation, they can always take a look at these videos. They can read the textbooks that are incorporated. Some examples here, some of the map survey results, everything that is incorporated here, it is interactive and helps people to really understand the process. And depending on which area they want to dig more into, we have an open door for them. And that is going to be something probably very useful for many science type of application as well, because of course the element of the geography. And the last section of the story map I built is looking at the process of creating story maps and how we can build a story map. And many of us are tempted to just log into the story map website and add images or maps or content and just be done with that. But what the story map team actually suggests is to not just start from the story map website, but also looking at the step-by-step processes that you logically think about your story, how you wanted to tell your story, why the story map that you want to create is going to be very important. So you can create those step-by-step processes on the paper, so you understand what is going to be logical consistency. Then you are going to go log into your application, add the content based on the process that you're looking for. But that's just one suggestion. Of course, people have different styles, but always I have been a favor of putting my mind on the piece of paper, so I know that what is the logical consistency right in front of my eyes, instead of just adding meaningless content to my application. And they talk about some very good examples here and how they are helping people to create much more meaningful story maps. And I believe that's a very wise way of creating story maps. I guess that is going to be very well connected to our next section on hands-on process using the story map application. And I think I have 15 minutes. Any questions? I'm finished with the presentation, so I can stop sharing, or Dr. Kumar, if you want me, I can have my screen shared as well.
Sure. I'm curious, you said you've been making story maps for the last few years. When did you first start making story maps? Because these are fascinating. These are really fascinating.
I did start creating the story map, I believe uh, maybe the second year it was in the market. So probably 2016, 2015, I made my first story map, but it was way different. So right now what we see is totally changed, and what we had at the beginning was more of a template-based story map. So you had to select what type of story map you want to create before you can actually start creating your story map. But I think that was limiting factor for many people. Right now is more of a template-based from scratch that you can just add different building blocks to your story on the fly.
So how is the pro version of ArcGIS? What's the difference? I mean, because ArcGIS looks pretty powerful, and then pro, is that like incredible?
So that's their slogan, I guess. They want to have a version of the ArcGIS desktop that is between ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Desktop. So they made the ArcGIS Pro, which has the capability of publishing maps on the website, on ArcGIS Online website. So you can just actually log into the ArcGIS Pro, and then right away when you make a map, you publish it on your ArcGIS. But in the past, for the ArcGIS desktop, you could not make a map and publish it right away in the platform. I believe that you had to go through the process of connecting to the server and then submit your request to the server. And then from the server itself, you publish your map. So ArcGIS Pro is much more powerful for the graphical interfaces, I believe. But I believe Dr. Reibel has an insight.
Yeah, I was just going to add that another difference between our which is
Dr. Reibel, your sound is breaking up a lot.
And bandwidth is no good. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No?
We
Yes?
can. Yes.
Okay. The tools for geospatial analysis in ArcGIS Pro are much more powerful. So if you guys recall the kinds of work and planning and analysis and to support science that I was talking about in the first workshop, actually relatively little of that can be done in basic ArcGIS Online. It has amazing tools, as you see, for data display, for crowdsourcing, for all of the cool. But if you want to into number crunching in order to have scientific explanations for the decisions you make in business, that's more analysis, and that's the kinds of things that ArcGIS Pro will support that this level does not. I hope you can hear that.
Yeah, I heard you.
Yeah.
From what I have heard from the non-GIS experts, that both of the applications they use, the ArcGIS Desktop, ArcGIS Pro was much easier to learn. So I think the learning curve would be much less compared to the ArcGIS Desktop.
Absolutely. So we're really talking about two different ways of being a GIS expert, I think is the way to put it. The kinds of things that been talking about today are areas of expertise that have real real value as job skills and in business. So does hardcore analytics, but it's a different area. It's a different sort of specialization, a different level of commitment to to the subject in a sense. So it's apples and oranges for.
I have a question for you. Just given how powerful GIS is and the tools and techniques, why has it not permeated business schools or business education more? Because we don't see many business schools that have courses or curriculum related to GIS. And why is that, do you think?
Well, there's actually quite a few, but I think probably part of the answer to that question is that the kinds of things that Dr. K is showing off to great advantage and demonstrating, in a really eye-popping way, are relative. So this all is part of the GIS universe of Esri products, right? That universe started out as a command line program application with really primitive graphics about 50 years ago. So it's very slowly evolved towards a zippier, user-friendly 21st century kind of product, and not away from, but in addition to the sorts of in-depth analysis that it was always capable of doing if you were willing to spend hundreds of hours learning to program it. So even the analysis side has gotten more user-friendly as well as more powerful, and it has greater scope in terms of the types of tools and the types of analytical tasks you can actually accomplish inside the interface without having to move stuff in and out to do other stuff. But so the bells and whistles, the really good bells and whistles, are relatively recent, and they're going to catch on. It's just going to take time. I think another reason possibly is that much of the of GIS use is either in the public sector or in use by consultants who work. Clients are mostly in the public sector. Obviously, those people are business people, but it's not private sector business, except, of course, their own partnerships and companies. So there's a sort of a perception among old timers that it's only public sector stuff that GIS is good for, and that's also starting to change. The installed base is moving into the private sector slowly but surely, mainly because it's already taken over the public sector completely. So. Anybody out there?
Any other questions?
It is neat that there's so many, like I think of eBird, isn't that the Cornell public data set that's just enormous, and to see the migration and the population and everything collected from that, and to be able to see that visually, I think is really striking. And I love that idea of an emotional place attachment map, and that the data just populates your model and ships it out. It's pretty neat.
I agree. I think there are lots of applications that GIS could be used, and because of the spatial aspects of all these phenomenon, the tool has become much easier to use because of the advancement of the cloud computing. You don't have to really buy a very powerful server. You can easily just buy the subscription for the ArcGIS Online, and then right away use the ArcGIS capability, or GIS capabilities, in fact. And in the past, it was much more difficult. You have to think about all of these different steps to configure your GIS server, get the infrastructure updated, and of course, there are so many security concerns that had to be thought. But right now, it's become, I believe, much more convenient for non-GIS experts or even just general public to use the GIS applications.